You're all anxiously awaiting another half hour of all right, so here we go. We're back on page 27 now. We just finished a monster problem. And now it looks like I have another one. But there's a little star next to the problem. You're looking at problem C at the top of page 27. I want you to take a look at the problem. And first of all, before I get too excited, how many answers is this problem going to have? 4. I know one of them is 4i. They tell me that. What is another one I automatically know? If one of them is 4i, the other one is negative 4i. So that is a given, folks. Those are automatics. Then there are 2 more, right? That I don't know what they are. I'm going to have to figure out now. Okay?
If it was just 4, it would still be number 4.
No, it's a complex. It's i's. One's with i's. Okay? Now, I want you to look at the problem because this one is sort of special. This problem is in what we call quadratic form. Now, it's not a quadratic equation because quadratic equation would be x squared. But if I look at kind of its corresponding quadratic, you see how similar to that this is? This is an x, this is x squared, this is an x squared, this is x to the 4th. What would you do if this were your problem? Yeah, I think it factors into plus 16 minus 3, I think. So if that factors like this, how do you think this one might factor if you choose to do the problem this way? X squared plus 16 and x squared minus 3. Now notice that this factor, when you solve it, what do we get as our answers? When we square root this, what do we get? Plus or minus 4i, which those are the 2 we knew we were going to end up with. What are the other 2 we get? X squared equals 3, so x equals plus or minus root 3. So the question was, what are the other answers? Well, the other answers are negative 4i and plus or minus root 3. Now, if you didn't notice that this can be treated exactly like a quadratic, because it's in quadratic form. Quadratic form means whatever you have here, it's right here, but it's squared. You see that? Just like whatever you have here, it's right here, but it's squared. So you could have an x to the 6th, x cubed, that would be quadratic form. But this would not be quadratic form. That's not quadratic form. You see that? Okay. Let's suppose you didn't notice it was quadratic form. So that takes us back to square 1. Then you would have to do what we did with our last problem, which was what? Simple division. So we would put a 4i out here. That was the one they told us. They gave us this one. We would put a 4i out here. And then across the top, 1, 0, 13, 0, negative 48. Katie?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are the answers plus minus 4i and plus minus root 3?
Yep.
But we needed 2 more answers if the
Well, wait, this one was given.
Right.
Okay, so that one technically is not one of the ones I found, that's given. I found this one,
Yeah.
and then I found the plus or minus root 3.
Okay.
So they gave me one to start with, and then I found 3 more.
Yeah.
So that gives me my 4.
Okay.
Now, if you write this one down as one of your answers that you found, I'm not gonna argue with you, it is an answer, they just give
I
it
just
out.
didn't know. So we still were finding 4 because I was confused.
We're finding 4, but one of them was given, so we really only found 3. But there were 4 altogether. All right, so back to this. I'm not gonna go through all this, but I wanna show you, if you didn't notice that was in quadratic form, this would be your setup for your division. Everybody good with that? And then we would do the division. Now, this one's a little easier, because what's 4i times 4i? I don't really need to FOIL. 4i times 4i is 16i squared, which is negative 16. Okay, this is going to be negative 48i squared, which is plus 48. Now, think about the one we did earlier. I divided out the one I knew. But remember, since that's imaginary, don't I automatically know its conjugate? So now I'll divide that one out. And lo and behold, just like we thought, what's left?
It's the 3.
This was x to the 4th, this was x cubed, so it's gonna be x squared minus 3, which is gonna give us, I didn't even write it down, but it's plus or minus root 3. Okay, so if you notice something special, do it. But if you don't notice it or don't know how to do it, you can plug and chug. I mean, this is the long haul meat and potatoes way of doing the problem. But it'll get you there. Okay? All right, number 2. Write the polynomial function with zeros of 2 and I and containing negative 1, 8. And it says multiply out. Anybody have any idea what's going on here? What in the world are we supposed to be doing? Oh, Braden, were you gonna raise your hand back
No,
there?
I'm sorry.
Well, one thing that I think we all ought to recognize right off the bat is that if I is a root, negative I will also be a root. They never come alone, ever. So once you have one imaginary, you're automatically going to have its conjugate. What factor would give me, like when I factor down here, what factor would give me an answer of x equals 2? X minus 2. Using that same logic then, what would give me a factor or a 0 of I? X minus I? And what would that one be? X plus I? Now are y'all with me? You have that lunchtime, that post-lunch zoning out thing going on. Does everybody understand, or does it make sense, how we went from the answers, the zeros, back to the factors? All right, let's FOIL. And when you FOIL, always start with the I ones first, because since they're conjugates, a bunch of bad stuff will cancel out. Okay, so I'm gonna FOIL those first. And like I promised, a bunch of stuff cancels out. What am I gonna be left with? Plus one, so x squared plus one. And then don't forget, you still got your x minus 2. Everybody okay with that? Now, so far so good, but why are we not done? What have I conveniently left out? Lauren?
It needs to contain the point of negative 180.
Exactly. There are lots of pictures that have those zeros. I need to know how stretched it is. You can get up to that point, or maybe it's upside down. So I need to figure out what the coefficient is that's out in front of this thing. How do you think I'll figure that out?
Plugging in the points to the next one.
This guy right here? Yeah, plug him in. So every x is going to be a negative 1, and every y is going to be an 8. Well, there's only one y. So this is like a parenthesis. So this n is just out here by himself. Work all this out. So that's going to be negative 1 minus 2 minus 1 minus 2 if I did my math right. So negative 1 cubed is negative 1. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. And a negative 1 and a minus 2. So that works out to be what? Negative 6. So n is 8 over negative 6, or negative 4/3. So my actual final multiplied out answer, I'm just going to distribute that negative 4/3. So negative 4/3 x cubed. What is negative 4/3 times negative 2? 8/3. Minus 4/3 x. And plus 8/3. And there is the multiplied out answer to the problem. So let's pause there, because there's another one coming up. It's going to be a little bit more complicated, so let's make sure that everybody's on board here. I erased part of where I started. Who has a question about a step here, even when I erased at the beginning?
How do we get 4/3 in, right?
We plugged in 8 for y and negative 1, oh, whatever that point was, yeah, negative 1 for all of the x's. And the math came out to be, all that was negative 6, so 8 over negative 6. All right, let's try B. I have a 0 at 1, and I have a 0 at 1 plus 2i. I contain the point negative 1, 4. Where do I even begin?
1 minus 2i.
So I have another root that's 1 minus 2i. Alright, so stop right there. You gotta know that. Got it? Conjugate comes with it. Okay, what happens next? Now I gotta write my factors. Don't forget that step. You gotta write your parentheses now. Nobody ever has a problem with this one. What's the factor? If x equals 1, the parentheses is gonna be x minus 1, right? So in other words, you made that, it was a positive, you made it a negative, right? So when I do this one, it's gonna be what? X minus 1 minus 2i. And what's this one gonna be? X minus 1 plus 2i? Now we get to FOIL. Start here. The order you do it doesn't matter, but you gotta be organized, because there's gonna be 9 numbers altogether. So what I do is I take this one times all 3. And then I take this one times all 3. And then I take this one times all 3. But you can do it whatever order you want. You just gotta make sure all of these are times by all of those. So here I go. X squared minus x plus 2ix. So I just took x times all 3 of them. Negative 1 times all 3 of them. And negative 2i. Always start, I know that's a mess, but always start with your i's. Because a bunch of stuff should cancel with any row. So I got my x squared minus 2x doesn't that cancel with that? And that cancels with that. And what's negative 4i squared? 4 added to the 1 makes 5. Now you get to do it one more time, times the x minus 1 now. So I'm gonna get x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5x. Quit yawning back there. So we get x cubed, what? Minus 3x squared plus 7x minus 5. Anybody else get that?
Yes.
Okay, that's a ton of work and we are not done. Because what do we still need to take into account? We gotta contain that term. So somewhere out here, there's a coefficient. It's gonna multiply that function to stretch it up, or shrink it or flip it or something. So 4 equals, okay, plug in negative 1. So that's negative 1 minus 3 minus 7 minus 5. Double check my arithmetic. You just say yes.
No, I've been watching you do the work. I agree.
I'm Ron, do you agree with me? Okay, so then I'm gonna put a negative 1/4 out here in front. So my final answer, after all that work, just distribute your negative 1/4. That's what I got as my final answer. That's a big problem, that's a lot of work. started by writing our factors, right? And we had to multiply all those together, clean up all that mess. Then we plugged in our -1 for our x's and our 4 for our y. We found our n. Okay, you guys have a dazed look in your eye? Let's try the next one. I won't go much longer, I know you've had a lot, this is a lot. Let's see about this next one, 'cause I think it's a little easier. It's interesting because I actually did this problem, or one just like it, in the honors class last period. It was on their homework. And a few of them solved it. This said solve, or whatever these directions are. Find all the zeros. That can solve it. Find the zeros. And a couple of them used the quadratic formula. Can we do that? No, because even though it looks kind of like it would be quadratic, it isn't, right? So what are we gonna do if we can't use the quadratic formula? You can't factor this, kids. You can't do this. I know those numbers were promising, but that's an x cubed. It's not going to work. You can't do it. So what are we gonna do? We have to find the zeros. What are we gonna do? You know this. What are we gonna do? PRRs. We're gonna guess. Now, the good news is, what are your PRRs? 1 and 5, -1 and 5, -5, right? That's it. You only have 4 choices. So you're just gonna start guessing. Okay? Now, be careful, because when you guess, what do you wanna guess?
5.
5? 5 is kind of a big number. All right, I'll guess 5. When I do the division, don't forget to put the 0 in. This kind of problem was on a test at some point. I don't even remember what class it was. But kids kept coming up to me and saying, Miss Ford, there aren't any zeros. And it was because they weren't writing right. You gotta have a 0 in there because there's no x squared. I don't think 5 works. Nah, 5 doesn't work. 1 does? Let's try 1. Yep, 1 does. Perfect. So, our job was to find the zeros. We found 1. How do we find the other ones? You know this.
You take
X squared
x
plus x plus 5,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Now I would do the quadratic formula. Does that factor?
No.
But it's a quadratic, and I can always use my quadratic formula. So x equals -b plus or minus square b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I got that. Is that right? -19 under there? Is that okay? So, how many answers did I find?
3.
A real one that we guessed, and then 2 imaginary ones that we got from the quadratic formula. Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right. You probably know this, maybe you don't know this, but because